Okay, so now we are recording. Welcome to the Real English Party Tuesday afternoon book club recording. That's right, we have decided to record these events simply because live streaming is not practicable at this time. So, of course, you will be able to look back at my past events if you go into my past events onto the web on the web page and on the events calendar. You'll be able to view past events to get caught up on the story. As best I can recall, in this story that we are reading, which is Stephen King's Fairy Tale, our hero Charlie has decided to accept money to basically work for Mr. Bowditch. He's now going to be paid by Mr. Bowditch in order to take care of him when he comes from the home from the hospital, which he'll be doing on Monday. He's tried to fix up the house and try to make it comfortable for someone who won't be able to walk and move around easily. As you may recall from previous events, Mr. Bowditch did have an accident, and our hero Charlie saved him or helped him in that accident. And he's actually become a little famous because of that, because his news story has been published a little bit more broadly than he had expected. Okay, so now since this is being recorded and not live streamed, I may go a little bit faster with this, knowing that you will be able to stop and rewind and listen to anything again as you please. Of as you are able to join at the appointed lesson time, which is approximately 3 o'clock on Tuesdays. You can certainly join if you have any questions. So I won't be stopping so much to try to answer questions that you're not asking. I will try to still point out some helpful phrases or useful phrases, or at least the phrases that I think would be useful to know if you are watching the recording. Even if you don't have the question about them, I would still choose to make future lessons about them or something to that effect if the language is that useful. So that will be there. We're going to jump right into it and try to move more quickly through the reading. Of course, what will happen is I usually start off with the reading going a little slower and then speeding up as the reading starts to climax. So, okay, so let us begin the reading. We're on part 4 of the chapter, okay, and we shall begin. Oh, there seems to be a plane passing overhead. Let's see if I wait for that jet. I think, a fighter jet. Wait for that to pass. And okay, let's go. I hadn't ridden my bike, and the walk down the hill to our house only took 10 or 12 minutes. But that night, I made it last. I had thinking to do and a decision to make. As I walked, I kept touching the bulge in my pocket, making sure it was still there. I'd tell Dad about Mr. Bowditch's call and his offer of employment. I'd show him the cash, 200 for what we'd spent and 500 for me. I'd tell him to put 400 of it in my college account, which just happened to be at First Citizens, and promise to put in another 400 every week that I was working for Mr. Bowditch, which might last right which might last right through the summer, or at least until football practice started in August. The question was whether or not I should tell him about how much money had been in the flour canister, and, of course, those gold BBs, if they were gold. By the time I let myself into our house, I'd made my decision. I'd keep the fact of the 8,000 in the canister to myself, and the BBs that weren't BBs, at least until I'd had my talk with Mr. Bowditch the next day. "Hey, Charlie," my father called from the living room. "Dog okay?" "She's fine." "Good to know. Grab yourself a Sprite and grab a chair. Rear Windows on TCM." I grabbed a Sprite, came in and muted the TV. "I've got something to tell you." "What could be more important than James Stewart and Grace Kelly?" "How about this?" I took the wad of money from my pocket and dropped it on the coffee table. I expected surprise, caution, and worry. What I got was interest and amusement. Dad thought Mr. Bowditch hiding money in one of his kitchen canisters fit right in with what he called the agrophobes' hoarding mentality. I told him about the haul of old reading matter, not to mention the old TV and the elderly kitchen appliances. Was there more in there? Some, I said, which wasn't a lie. Dad nodded. Did you check the other canisters? There might be a few hundred in in with the sugar. He was smiling. Nope. He took the 200, a little more than we actually spent, but he'll probably need other stuff. Want me to deposit 400 of yours? Sure. Good call. In one way, he's getting you cheap, at least for the week. I think a full-time home helper would get more. On the other hand, you'll be earning while you learn, and you'll only be spending nights up there during your spring vacation. He turned to look at me squarely. Are we clear on that? Totally, I said. Okay, good. Bowditch, rat-holing money makes me a little uneasy only because we don't know where it came from, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I like that he trusts you. I like that you're willing to take this on. You thought you'd be doing it for free, didn't you? Yeah, I did. You're a good kid, Charlie. Not sure what I did to deserve you. Okay, very touching moment there. I just want to stop there for a moment because you may not have heard, or maybe you have and didn't know what it meant. But in the end here, he says, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Okay, so now this phrase of giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Do you know what that means? Because that could be a very useful phrase for you to use in situations where you don't know whether you should trust someone or you shouldn't trust someone. But you decide if you would make a mistake, you'll make a mistake to trust someone and see if they should give you a reason to doubt them. So in this case, when we say give them the benefit of the doubt, it really is just to say, to give them a chance to earn your trust. All right. I guess in this case, doubt is a benefit. It means that you doubt that you can't trust this person just because you just met them and you don't know. So you should give them the benefit of doubting that they are a bad person and believing at least that they could be a good person. You give them the benefit of the doubt. So in this situation, you really want to think about, when was the last time you gave someone the benefit of the doubt? Or the last time someone gave you the benefit of the doubt? Now, I can think of a time, really interesting. The last student that I took on as a coach, as you know, I'm a party host primarily. I do some teaching for Norton Place, a cafe in Ikejiri, Ohashi, and I do some kindergarten teaching for Star Child Kindergarten in the mornings. But I like to think primarily I am a party host. I host these book clubs and I host private parties that you could schedule or I might schedule with your friends to give you English activities like a book reading or some other activities that we could do in a fun environment that you enjoy. But I do take on a handful of students. These are people that I wouldn't say that I teach them, but I certainly am their private English coach. And I'm helping them to get over their specific issue or exercise the specific muscle they need to exercise in English. And I received a new student recently, I guess it'd be about 2 months ago. And she had a previous English teacher and she didn't know who I was, but I had been referred by a friend of her English teacher, a mutual friend, and not knowing who I was, she still did invite me not only to meet with her, but to come to her mansion apartment, which means her condominium, in her city. She gave me her exact address, and we actually conducted our first session in her office, in her apartment, or in her house. And I would say that's a case where, well, she didn't know if she really wanted me to be a coach. And really, you have to trust someone somewhat to allow them to come to your house when you don't know them. But she gave me the benefit of the doubt, right? She decided that she would just trust me just enough to know whether she could trust me. So in this case, that's exactly what's happening here. Mr. Charlie's father says, I'm willing to give Mr. Bowditch the benefit of the doubt. That means to trust him enough for him to earn more trust, or to teach us that he shouldn't be trusted, right? So that's basically what's going on there, just going over that phrase. But now let's move on in the story. Considering what I was holding back, not just about Mr. Bowditch, but some of the shit I pulled with Bertie, that made me a little ashamed. Lying in bed that night, I imagined Mr. Bowditch having a gold mine in his locked shed, maybe with a bunch of dwarves to work it. Dwarves with names like Sleepy and Grumpy. That made me smile. I had an idea that whatever was in the shed might be the big secret he wanted to tell me about, but I was wrong. I didn't find out about the shed until later. Okay, so we can see here, he's feeling ashamed because, I don't know if you remember, but, everyone's calling him a good kid. In the newspaper, they're celebrating him as being, a savior to Mr. Bowditch. Mr. Bowditch calls him a straight arrow. And now his father says, you're such a good kid. I don't know what I did to deserve you, which is quite a compliment for any adult to give to a child. And he kind of feels ashamed because he knows that when he was going through his most frustrating time, he did a lot of shit. And of course, this word shit is a curse word. It's a bad word that I wouldn't ask you or recommend that you use in regular conversation. But shit does a lot of heavy lifting in Stephen King novels. That is, his characters often use words like shit, damn, and words like that. And they often, shit just means anything bad in that case, right? So a lot of shit means some of the shit. That's all just something. It could mean anything at that point. Usually when we use a curse word, it's something bad that we're talking about or something that we're not happy about. So, of course, that's what he's talking about. He still feels guilty about all the shit that he did when he was with Bertie and having his troubles, right? But let's move on to chapter 6. Yes, chapter 6, hospital visit, the 6th, Stantonville, gold greed, and Mr. Bowditch comes home. Mr. Bowditch and I had quite the chat while his roommate was in the third-floor lounge, watching the White Sox play the Tigers with a heart monitor strapped to his chest. He's got some sort of ticker problem they can't quite fix, Mr. Bowditch said. Thank Christ, I don't have that to worry about. I've got enough problems. He showed me how he could walk to the bathroom, leaning on those arm sleeves crutches for all he was worth. It obviously hurt him, and when he came back from taking a leak, his forehead was wet with sweat. But I was encouraged. He might need the urinal with its long and somehow baleful neck for night calls, but it looked good for avoiding the bedpan. As long as he didn't fall in the middle of the night and break his leg all over again, that was. I could see the muscles in his scrawny arms trembling with every lunging step. He sat down on the bed with a sigh of relief. Can you help me with he gestured at the ironmongery encasing his leg. I lifted the leg with the fixator, and when it was stretched out, he sighed again and asked for a couple of pills from the Dixie cup on his night table. I gave them to him, poured some water from his pitcher, and down they went, his Adam's apple bobbing in his wrinkled neck like a monkey on a stick. They switched me from the morphine pump to his. He said, OxyContin. I'm sorry, one more time. Let me repeat that. They switched me from the morphine pump to this, he said, OxyContin. The doctor says I'll get hooked if I'm not already, and I'll have to kick the habit. Right now, that seems like a fair trade. Just walking to the bathroom feels like a fucking marathon. I could see that, and the bathroom at his house was further from the rollout. He might be needing the bedpan after all, at least to begin with. I went into the bathroom, went down a washcloth, and wrung it out. I'm sorry, one more time. I went into the bathroom, wet down a washcloth, and wrung it out. When I bent over him, he pulled back. Here, here, what do you think you're doing? Getting the sweat off you. Hold still. We never know when the turning points come in our relationship with others, and it was only later that I realized that was one for us. He held back a moment longer, then relaxed a little and allowed me to wipe his brow and cheeks. Feel like a fucking baby. You're paying me. Let me earn my fucking money. That made him chuckle. A nurse peeked in the door and asked if he needed anything. He said he didn't, and when she was gone, he told me to close the door. This is where I ask you to stand up for me, he said, at least until I can stand up for myself and Radar too. You ready to do that, Charlie? I'll do my best. Yeah, maybe you will. That's all I can ask. I wouldn't put you in this position if I didn't have to. A woman named Ravensburger came to see me. Have you met her? I said I had. Hell of a name, isn't it? I try to think of a burger made out of raven meat, and my mind just boggles. I won't even say he was stoned on the oxy, but I won't say he wasn't. As gaunt as he was, 6 feet tall, and surely no more than 150, those pink pills had to pack a wallop. Okay, stop there for a moment. We see what happened so far in beginning this chapter. Okay, he goes to visit the hospital while Mr. Bowditch's roommate is on the first floor watching the Red Sox game, I believe, a baseball game. This is where he's expecting to hear a secret. Apparently, he mentions something like a turning point. He says, we never know when the turning points come. Turning points come in our relationships with others. I think that's an interesting phrase that you might want to use if you can. Turning points, right? Now, turning points basically are obviously those points or those moments that you share with someone in a relationship where the relationship changes, fundamentally changes, or changes in a big way. So he didn't realize it at the time, but this was a turning point in his relationship with Mr. Bowditch. What do you think? How do you think the relationship changed from then? I think it has something to do with the fact that in the next sentence, he held back a moment longer, but then relaxed and let or allowed Charlie to wipe his brow and his cheeks like a fucking baby, right? So now, letting someone care for him probably was something very hard for Mr. Bowditch to do. So for him to let Charlie care for him, that was a turning point in their relationship. That means they were going one direction, and now we're turning toward a relationship of trust and allowing someone to be close to you. Okay, that's a turning point in the relationship. You might want to think about what the turning points in your relationships have been. For example, if you have a significant other, a wife or husband, or even a best friend, and think about what were those points in the relationship that made you so close that it was a turning point? Or maybe what were those points in the relationship that made you so distant that it was a turning point, right? Turning points can be anything that changes the relationship in a major way. It doesn't have to be a good way or a bad way. It's just changing in a major way. I could think of some turning points in a bad way in my marriage that ended many years ago, right? But I prefer to think of those positive turning points, right? I think one of the real major turning points, believe it or not, one of the major turning points in my relationship with my partner now is when I was invited over and she had prepared dinner and she had allowed me to wash her very expensive and collectible dishes. She she allowed me to wash her dishes and of course to clean that. I then learned how to clean the rest of the kitchen, and one day I'm actually going to figure out how where to put the dishes so I can put them away in the morning. But that was a turning point where she was not only serving me and trying to impress me, but she was also allowing me to assist her. And from then on, I really feel like our relationship was less about proving ourselves to each other and more about supporting each other whenever, however we could. Right. So that was a turning point in our relationship. You might want to think about what could be a turning point in your relationship. All right. Now, there's some other phrases I would love to go into with this, but let's just discuss this for a moment. Okay. So now we realize that Mr. Bowditch is now on a very strong painkiller, OxyContin. OxyContin is a very strong and highly addictive painkiller. If someone has been addicted to drugs, possibly even if they were alcoholics, they might not want to use OxyContin because it could trigger their addiction again, and they might go back into their addiction, and they might begin to spiral down into a bad lifestyle. So OxyContin is a very dangerous stuff, dangerous drug. But he's taking it. They're saying he's probably going to have to get over the addiction later on, and he's about to now tell Charlie the secret of. But then what we wanted to see at the bottom there says, I won't say he was stoned, which means high on the drug of oxy being short for the OxyContin, but I won't say he wasn't. Now, a lot of times we often say things like that. Like we'd say, I won't say something, but I won't say something the opposite either, which means to say that it's an indirect way of saying that something is true, or I believe something to be true. All right. Like, so for example, if like, I don't know, if someone asks me, how was that movie? And I'm a little bit nervous because I'm not sure if they think it was a good movie or a bad movie. I might be a little bit clever by saying, well, I won't say it was the best movie, but I won't say it wasn't. Right. So when I say that, I'm cleverly saying I think it was a really, really good movie, but without saying that. I won't say it was the best movie, but I also won't say it wasn't, which is to say that, oh, it could be the best movie. So in this case, he's saying probably Mr. Bowditch was stoned on the oxy or high on the OxyContin. As gaunt as he was, this word gaunt, what do you think that means? Do you know? Right? Okay, so it says, of course, the dictionary may have appeared on the definition may have appeared on the screen a little bit too long, but it's okay because you don't have to really rely on that definition to really guess what the meaning is here. Gaunt, right? Maybe you might guess that it's something sort of like thin or skinny, right? But in this way, when we say gaunt, I mean, lots of people, especially where I live, lots of people want to be thin and they want to be skinny. But most people don't want to be gaunt. Gaunt is sort of like skinny or in an unhealthy way. Perhaps skinny in a sickly way, as if you have been sick for so long that you've lost weight and now you look unhealthy. So that kind of gaunt is not necessarily a good gaunt, right? It's gaunt in a sickly or elderly way, right? That's what you might guess as the meaning of that word. And then when we look at the dictionary definition, It says a person lean and haggard, especially because of suffering, hunger, or age. Right? So pretty much our guess, our crack at the word is also matching the dictionary definition, right? But if you could have guessed that just from the situation, right? It says, as gaunt as he was, 6 feet tall, and surely no more than 150, right? That's 150 pounds, right? So that's very tall and very light, right? So of course that means gaunt or skinny, but in an unhealthy way. And he says, those pink pills had to pack a wallop. Now that's another phrase we want to make sure. That's something you can use right off, right? Pack a wallop. I have no idea what a wallop is, right? I've never heard the word wallop used except in this idiom, to pack a wallop. Mhm. I can only assume that a wallop is something big and powerful and dangerous, maybe like a big punch or very strong hit, right? But I know for a fact that to pack a wallop means to be very, very, very strong. And we often do use it with things like drugs or alcohol, something that has a very strong effect, perhaps dangerously so. We would say it packs a wallop. We could also say someone packs a wallop if they're just a very strong fighter, or if they're anything that they are powerful and have a powerful effect. We could say they pack a wallop. Almost anything can pack a wallop if it's powerful or it has a strong effect. But just for our own curiosity, let's see what the word wallop says in the dictionary. Wallop. Strike or hit very hard. Now that's the verb, right? And we don't use that verb very often, but you can wallop someone. That means to hit them. But that's not what this word means. I think this is more like the noun, right? A heavy blow or punch, right? So there you go. So we can say something packs a wallop, or we can say something packs a punch, right? They have the same meaning, wallop and punch. We learned that today. And to say that is to say that it's very powerful or has a very strong effect. Okay, so continuing on. She talked to me about what she called my payment options. I asked her what the damage was so far, and she gave me a printout. It's in the drawer there. He pointed. But don't bother about that just now. I said, that's mighty high, and she said, good care is mighty expensive, Mr. Bowditch, and you have gotten the best. She said, if I needed to consult a payment specialist, whatever that is, when it's home and dry, she'd be happy to facilitate a meeting, either before I leave or after I'm home. I said I didn't think that would be necessary. I told her I could pay in full, but only if I got a discount. Then we got down to the dickering. We finally settled on 20% off, which comes to about a $19,000 amount. I whistled. Mr. Bowditch grinned. I tried to get her down to 25%, but she wouldn't budge off 20. I think that's the industry standard. Hospitals are an industry, in case you wondered. Hospitals and prisons, not much difference in how they run their businesses, except that prisons, it's the taxpayers who wind up footing the bill. He wiped a hand across his eyes. I could have paid the whole thing, but I enjoyed the dickering. Been a long time since I had a chance to do any. Yard sales in the old days bought a lot of books and old magazines. I like old things. Am I rambling? I am. Here's the point. I can pay, but I need you to make it possible. If you're thinking about what's in the flour canister, he waved that away as if $8,000 were petty cash. In terms of what he owed the hospital, it was. Here's what I want you to do. He told me. When he was done, he asked me if I needed him to write it down. It's okay if you do, as long as you destroy your notes when the job's done. Maybe just the safe combination. I'll write it on my arm. then wash it off. Okay, so now on this page, I think there was another word or two that I thought would be useful for you. If I can point it out quickly or remember it, I will. If not, we'll just move on. Oh yeah, this word dickering, dickering, right? I've never heard the word dickering before. Or maybe I have heard it before, but in this context, I would really need to guess what it means. I wouldn't look it up in the dictionary. I would just guess the meaning, right? I told her I could pay in full, but only if I got a discount. Then we got down to the dickering. Okay, so to get down to something is to start doing something, right? So we got down to the dickering. Now, after it says we finally settled on 20% off. So basically, dickering is some way of kind of, right, bargaining or negotiating, or what we call in New York, haggling, right? I guess in different places they have different slang terms for it. And where Stephen King comes from, it's called dickering, right? But basically, it's trying to get a good bargain, trying to get a good price, right? Get a good deal. So that's a sort of negotiating, right? And that dickering was used more than once on this page, right? So it's good that we know what that means. When we hear it a second time, that reinforces the meaning that we've guessed, right? But I enjoyed the dickering, right? Been a long time since, right? Of course, we used to do it at yard sales. That's basically what he's saying. He likes to dicker. He likes to negotiate. He likes to bargain. Okay, and then I think there might have been one more phrase that I thought might have been interesting to be used. Uh, hmm. Hmm. Oh, you know what? I just can't find it at the moment. So I guess we will just move on, I guess, unfortunately. If you were here to ask the questions, I might be able to answer. But since this is a recording, a live recording, of course, that you are not attending, we shall continue on. You'll do it? Yes. I couldn't imagine not doing it, if only to find out if what he was telling me was real. Good. Repeat the steps back to me. I did, then used his bedside pen to write a series of numbers and turns on my upper arm, where the sleeve of my t-shirt would cover it. Thank you, he said. You'll have to wait until tomorrow to see Mr. Heinrich, but you can get ready tonight when you feed Radar. I said okay, said goodbye, and left. I was, of my dad's word, gobsmacked. Halfway down the elevator, I thought of something and came back. Changed your mind already? He was smiling, but his eyes looked worried. No, I just wanted to ask you about something you said. What was it? Something about presents. You said a brave man helps, but a coward gives presents. I don't remember saying that. Well, you did. What does it mean? I don't know. It must have been the pills talking. He was lying. I lived with a drunk for several years, and I knew a lie when I heard it. Okay. So, okay, interesting thing about this is, okay, we're not getting the details. The author is not giving us the details about what Mr. Bowditch is asking Charlie to do. We can guess perhaps that he's asking him to get some money or get something from some kind of safe. I only think that because he's writing down combination, the way to turn a combination lock, perhaps, on his upper arm or shoulder. Okay, and I'm guessing that that's what he's going to do, but they're not giving us the details here, right? Charlie is telling a story, but leaving that part as a little bit of a mystery, I guess, until he actually gets around to doing the thing, right? So moving on to part two. I biked back to 1 Sycamore Street, and it wouldn't be an overstatement to say I was wild with curiosity. I unlocked the back door and accepted an exuberant greeting from Radar. She was able to get up on her back paws for strokes, which made me think that the newer pills might be packing a punch. There's that term again, right? Packing a punch, packing a wallop, same thing, very powerful, strong. Okay. I let her out in the backyard to do some business. I kept sending her mental messages to hurry up and pick a spot. When she was back in, I went upstairs to Mr. Bowditch's bedroom and opened his closet. He had a lot of clothes, mostly slop around stuff with flannel shirts and khaki pants. But there were 2 suits. One was black, one was gray, and both of them looked like the kind of suits George Raft and Edward G. Robinson wore in movies like Each Dawn I Die, double-breasted and wide in the shoulders. I pushed aside the clothes and revealed a Watchman's safe, medium-sized, old-fashioned, about 3 feet high. I squatted, and as I reached for the combination dial, something cold nuzzled my back where my shirt had pulled out of my pants. I yelped and turned to see Radar, her tail wagging slowly back and forth. The cold thing had been her nose. "Don't do that, girl," I said. She sat down, grinning as if to say she'd do what she wanted. I turned back to the safe. I got the combo wrong the first time, but on the second try, the door swung open. The first thing I saw was a gun resting on the safe's single shelf. It was bigger than the one my dad gave my mom for those times when he had to be away for a few days, or once for a week, on a company retreat. That one was a P-32, a lady's gun for sure, and I thought he might still have it but wasn't entirely sure. There were times when he was drinking was at its worst. I'd gone looking for it, but I never found it. This one was bigger, probably a P-45 revolver. Like most of Mr. Bowditch's stuff, it looked old school. I picked it up gingerly and found the catch that swung the cylinder. It was loaded, all 6 chambers. I swung the cylinder back in place and returned it to the shelf. Considering what he'd told me, a gun made sense. A burglar alarm might have made even more, but he didn't want any police calls at number 1 Sycamore. Besides, in her earlier days, Radar had been a perfectly good burglar alarm, Andy Chin being a case in point. On the floor of the safe was what Mr. Bowditch had told me I'd find, a big steel bucket with a knapsack laid over the top. I picked up the knapsack and saw the bucket was filled almost to the top with those BBs that weren't BBs, but solid gold pellets. The bucket had a double handle. I grabbed it and lifted. Okay, all right. Okay, so maybe just some phrases that we could use, some words that I could point out here. Hopefully you can guess what the word nuzzle means, right? I squatted and I reached for the combination dial. Something cold nuzzled my back. Now to nuzzle, it might be hard to guess that, but to nuzzle usually means to rub closely against something, usually with your face. We often think of nuzzling with our face, right? So even when he said nuzzled our back, it's kind of giving us a hint that it's actually Radar's nose, right? Nuzzled against the back of my neck, sort of rubbed up closely. Mm-hmm. And there's that word again, I yelped, right? Which we learned in a previous event. Yelped means screamed or yelled in surprise. The first time he yelped was because the phone rang and he didn't know how to use it, right? And now he's yelped because he's surprised that Radar has followed him upstairs and put his cold, wet nose to the back of his neck, right? Okay, so then I think there was another phrase here that we could look at. I mean, not even a phrase, maybe a word that I wonder if you could guess what it means. Yes, this word, gingerly, right? It says, I picked it up gingerly. and found the catch that swung the cylinder. Okay, picked it up gingerly. Gingerly. Okay, in this case, what does gingerly mean? Mhm. In this situation, since we're talking about a gun, we could probably guess, we could probably guess that gingerly means something like carefully or with great caution, right? Not recklessly, not quickly, not, but maybe in a very slow and deliberate fashion to make sure that no accidents happen. I guess that's what gingerly means. Now, I would, if I had not seen this word before, I think ginger usually means cheerful or happy. So I would have thought that gingerly means happily and just maybe less carefully. But just because of this situation, I'm guessing that this gingerly means careful, right? But let's actually look it up. It says, in a careful or cautious manner, right? That's right. And of course, gingerly can be an adjective, which means that you are showing great care or caution. So both of these cases, basically it means carefully. So, right, but ginger actually means happy. I never understood why we would use the word gingerly in this way. But yes, it does mean carefully. And that's something that might be good for you to know. Oftentimes, if you want to use another word other than carefully or cautiously, gingerly is a good way, especially when you're telling a story. Mhm. So definitely think of ways that you or situations where you would use the word gingerly, like picking up a loaded gun or something to that effect. Maybe there was one or two other words I was thinking of, but I don't see them right off. So let's continue on. Let's see. We can get to the end of section 2, 3, and 4 with this reading. Here we go. From my squatting position, I could barely manage it. There had to be 40 pounds of gold in there, maybe 50. I sat down and turned to look at Radar. Jesus Christ, this is a fucking fortune. She thumped her tail. That night, after I fed her, I went upstairs and looked at the bucket of gold again, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. When I got home, Dad asked me if I was ready for Mr. Bowditch's homecoming. I said I was, but I had stuff to do before he arrived. Still okay to borrow your drill and that power screwdriver? Of course, and I'd still be glad to come up and give you a hand if I could, but I've got a meeting at 9. It's that apartment house fire I told you about. Turns out it may have been arson. I'll be fine. I hope so. Are you okay? Sure. Why? You just seem a little off. Worried about tomorrow? A little, I said, which wasn't a lie. You may wonder if I had any urge to tell my father about what I'd found. I didn't. Mr. Bowditch had sworn me to secrecy. That was one thing. He claimed the gold hadn't been stolen in the usual sense, and that was another. I'd asked what that meant, but all he would say is that nobody in the whole world was looking for it. Until I knew more, I was willing to take him at his word. There was another thing. I was 17 years old, and this was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me, by far, and I wanted to chase it. Okay. Before we move on a bit, I want to make sure you understand words like arson, right? Okay, so we know that Charlie's father is a insurance adjuster. So basically, insurance companies pay you when you have an accident that destroys your house. But if it's not an accident, then they shouldn't pay you. So sometimes they have to investigate the nature of the accident. Of arson is when you purposefully burn a property down. Usually it's a house or a building. You purposely burn a property down. It could also be a tree, or you could start a wildfire. Anything where you purposefully start a fire and to burn something down could be arson. When it's a crime, it is arson. If it's something that's legal, that you're supposed to do or that you want to do and that you've been told to do, the law allows you to do, it's not arson. It's just burning something. But when it's illegal, it's the crime known as arson, right? So that's what he's talking about. He has to go to investigate a potential arson. So he won't be available to help tomorrow, right? Then another phrase I really thought would be useful for you, if you don't know it, definitely you want to make this phrase your own. It's useful. Sworn, he had sworn me to secrecy. To swear to secrecy. Swear me to secrecy. So now that was actually something that came up in our movie night a couple of months ago. At our top, we watched the introduction scene to Top Gun Maverick, and that phrase, swear someone to secrecy, came up. And so I want to make sure it is understood. Yeah, to swear someone to secrecy is to make someone promise not to tell their secret, right? So when we swear, what we do is we make a promise to God that we won't do something. So to swear someone to secrecy is to make someone promise to God that they won't tell their secret, right? So that was one thing, one reason why he didn't want to tell his father. There were other reasons as well. But then there was something that I thought was also useful here. I was willing to take him at his word. Take him at his word. Here's another phrase, and hopefully you're probably noticing that it's very similar to another phrase we talked about in this very event, right? We talked about the phrase, give someone the benefit of the doubt. Well, to take someone at their word is very similar. It basically means that you believe what someone says. You don't have to check, you don't investigate, you just believe what they said because they said it. So in this case, you just trust them enough. You trust them just enough to believe that what they say is the truth. You take them at their word, right? So you have to think of times now when you were taken at your word or you had to take someone at their word. Usually a situation where you could not check to see if it was true or not, right? You have no choice. You have to take them at their word. You have to believe them. You have to accept that what they said was the truth. When was the last time you had to do that? Well, maybe in this very event. For example, some of these words, many of these words or phrases, I'm explaining them to you, but I'm not giving you a dictionary definition every time. A lot of the times I'm giving you what I have guessed these words to mean in the past. And because I'm a native speaker and an experienced teacher, you are taking me at my word that my instruction or my explanations are true, right? They may not be, but you take me at my word. And I certainly do appreciate it, all right? So let's see if we can get through section 4. Let's see how long section 4 is. Yeah, it's a bit long, so we're going to see, try not to stop too much as we go through on this, unless we see something really useful. Okay, moving on. On Monday morning, I biked up to Mr. Bowditch's house, bright and early to feed Radar, and she did the heavy looking on while I installed the safety bars. The toilet was already a cozy fit in the tiny bathroom, and the safety bars would make a decent to make. Hold on one more time. The toilet was already a cozy fit in the tiny bathroom, and the safety bars would make a decent descent to the unloading position even cozier. But I thought that was good. I foresaw a certain amount of grumbling, but it would be hard for him to fall. He could even hold on to the bars while he urinated, which I thought was a plus. I tried wriggling them, and they stayed solid. What do you think, Raids? Good to go? Radar thumped her tail. You can weigh the gold on my bathroom scale, Mr. Bowditch told me during our conversation. It won't be exact, but a kitchen scale takes forever. I know from experience. Use the knapsack to weigh and carry. Go a little on the heavy side. Heinrich will weigh it himself on a scale that's more accurate. Digital, you know? He broke it into syllables like that, making it sound both silly and pretentious. How do you get it to how do you get it to him when you one more time? Hold on. How do you get it to him when you need a cash infusion? Stantonville was 7 miles away. I take a Uber, Heinrich pays. For a minute, I didn't understand. Then I did. What are you grinning about, Charlie? Nothing. Do you do these exchanges at night? He nodded. Usually around 10, when most of the people in the neighborhood are tucked in for the night, especially Miss Richland from across the street. That one's a nosy Parker. So you said. It bears repeating. I had gotten the same impression. I don't think mine's the only business Heinrich does at night, but he's agreed to close the shop tomorrow so you can come in the morning between 9:30 and 10. I've never done an exchange of this size with him. I'm sure it will be all right. He's never played anything but straight with me. But there's a gun in the safe, and if you want to take it for protection, that would be fine. I had no intention of taking it. I know guns make some people feel powerful, but I'm not one of those guys. Just touching it made me feel creepy. If you had told me I would be carrying it not too far in the future, I would have called you crazy. I found a scoop in the pantry and went upstairs. I had washed the numbers off my arm after putting them in a password-protected note on my phone. But I didn't even need to consult it. The safe opened on my first try. I took the knapsack off the bucket and just marveled at all that gold. Unable to resist the impulse, I plunged my hands in up to the wrists and let the gold pellets run through my fingers. I did it again, and a third time. There was something hypnotic about it. I shook my head as if to clear it and started scooping gold. The first time I weighed the knapsack, the scale registered at little over 3 pounds. I added more and got it up to 5. The last time, the needle stopped at 7, and I decided that was good. If Mr. Heinrich's digital scale showed more than the agreed upon 6 pounds, I would bring back the extra. I still had stuff to do at the house before Mr. Bowditch's arrival. I reminded myself to get a bell he could ring in the night if he needed something. Home Care for Dummies suggested an intercom or baby monitor, but I thought Mr. Bowditch might like something a little more old school. I had asked him how much 6 pounds of gold was worth, both wanting and not wanting to know the amount I'd be carrying on my back as I biked the 7 miles, mostly rural, to Stantonville. He told me that the last time he checked with the gold-priced group in Texas, it was going to be about $15,000 a pound. $15,000 a pound. But he can have it for 14 a pound. That's the price we agreed upon. It comes to $84,000, but he'll give you a check for $74,000. That will take care of my hospital bill with a little left over for me and a nice profit for him. Nice was putting it mildly. I don't know when Mr. Bowditch last checked with the gold price group, but as of the end of April in 2013, he was way low. I had checked the price of gold on my laptop before going to bed on Sunday night, and it was selling at better than $1,200 an ounce, which came to about $20,000 per pound. 6 pounds would have gone for around $115,000 on the gold exchange in Zurich, which meant this Heinrich dude would be $40,000 to the good. And the gold wasn't like hot diamonds, where the buyer could insist on discounting because of the risk. The pellets were unmarked, anonymous, and could easily be melted down into little ingots, or maybe into jewelry. I thought about calling Mr. Bowditch in the hospital to tell him he was selling cheap, but didn't, for a very simple reason. I thought he wouldn't care. I could sort of understand that. Even with 6 pounds taken from Captain Kidd's bucket of gold, there was plenty left. My job, although Mr. Bowditch never said it, was just to do the deal and get ripped off. It was a hell of a responsibility, and I was determined to live up to the trust he put in me. I buckled the straps on the knapsack, checked the floor between the closet safe and the bathroom scale for any gold pellets that had gotten away, and found none. I gave Radar a good stroking for luck and headed out carrying $115,000 in a beat-up gold knapsack. My old friend Bertie Bird would have called it a lot of cheddar. Okay. Okay, so this story is moving on a little bit slowly, but yeah, we're getting to a little bit more action or revealing of mystery. So it looks like the favor in this case was that Mr. Bowditch has, I guess, potentially millions of dollars worth of gold pellets in his closet in a safe. And so now he's trusting Charlie to take these gold pellets and turn them into cash by delivering them to a man named Mr. Heinrich, who's exchanging them at a very steep discount and therefore making a big profit. And he's willing to do it, and he's determined to do it. Right? There might have been some words that we come across in that last section that you might have questions about. This is why we would want you to attend this event and actually see what questions you could get answered, and then have those questions answered as you need. We could also practice using some of these words or phrases in the context of your life and make sure that you understand them correctly. We could also focus on pronouncing the words and phrases similarly to the way I did. You notice I do take extra care to try to pronounce these phrases as I would speak them, which is often why I have to repeat again, because I'm reading this for the first time. And without knowing exactly what I'm going to read, I'm sure to make many mistakes. Even so, it's a benefit to you to listen and to repeat if possible. And this is now recorded, so if there's any phrase here that you think it's worth doing so, you can stop it and repeat. Try to repeat the phrase. Try to repeat it the same way. What I hope you don't do is just sit there and listen passively and let the hour pass, because that would be a wasted hour. Just letting the words flow over you could be interesting listening exercise. It could be, but this book club is really not just for listening, and it's not just for reading. It's also a study. It's also a means for a discussion, things that we can discuss, and of course, acquiring vocabulary. There's a lot of things we want to do in this book club at the same time. So we hope that you'll join. I hope that you'll join. And more importantly, if you're listening to this, don't just passively listen. It's a recording now, so you can just press stop, try to repeat the words and phrases that are new or you think are interesting to you. You can stop it at any time. You can rewind and listen to something again and again until you can pronounce it similarly, right? I think that's really the best that you can do with the recording. You could do even better by joining the next event. And as you will see, if no one does sign up to join, then the event will be recorded as usual, but you will be invited on the same day, probably at the same time, if you happen to be available, to join for free. The link is provided on the web page, and you just click on the link and you go right to this chat room where you can maybe consider it a trial where you could join in, and it'll be your chance to try to read and match my pronunciation, or even do better if you're an advanced English speaker, right? So we hope that you will join for the next event, but even not, if you would like to continue to lurk and to watch the recording only, this recording for this event will probably be posted. Probably it will take a few hours to render the recording, but then it will be posted by the end of Tuesday. We also have another event coming up on Tuesday evening, 8 o'clock p.m. You can join that event. It's a little bit easier reading, right? That is going to be, we're reading a new book. We're starting a new book tonight, so it's a good time to join. It's called, I think it's Sheila the Great, or otherwise known as Sheila the Great, which is sort of like a Judy Blume book that exists in Judy Blume, a universe that Judy Blume has created around a child from a former book that we have been reading. So we're going to start that tonight. If you've missed this, you can certainly join that. That one is not going to be a live stream. It's not going to be recorded. That is a private event, but you can find that on our webpage, on our events calendar, and just sign up. And just put in your information at the bottom of the page, and then you'll be registered to go. We'll send you a link, and you can join our group, and we'll have fun with you. The same goes for tomorrow at 8 o'clock also, 8 p.m. Wednesday, we will have a Wednesday night book club, and there we are reading The Voyages of Dr. Dolittle. We're kind of in the middle of that book, but it's really the kind of story where you can jump in anytime. It's more intermediate reading than a lower level. Tonight is more for less experienced readers. Tomorrow is a little bit more experienced readers, but not quite as experienced as this book, which is a book that's really at my reading level, right? But yeah, you can join that, and what we'll do is the other members will be able to, probably there'll only be one tomorrow, will be able to recite to you how much has happened in the story so far, and then once we've got you caught up, then we all take turns trying to read. I will model, you'll repeat, and we'll see how well and how much we can learn and discuss about Dr. Dolittle. So there's many options now. There will be even more going forward. So hopefully you will take this opportunity to practice your English in another way, and certainly don't just sit there and convince yourself that you're doing something productive by just watching. Yeah. All right. So, like I said, please do take the time to join the Real English Party of Life, right? Don't just let life pass you by and just say, oh, I'm just shy, right? Do something, make something of your life, get out there, join the party, be an English speaker. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.